The last speaker today is one that we've already had, Steve Hassan, which I hope I eventually get a closer approximation to the correct pronunciation. And he's going to continue to speak about ideas for activism in a besieged environment. Mr. Hassan.
Thanks, Greg, very much, and thank you for being here. It's an honor to be here. And as you probably know, I was recruited into a front group of the Moonies in 1974 and was promoted to a leadership position within that group and was involved with deceptively recruiting and indoctrinating people into a belief system that Moon was the Messiah, 10 times greater than Jesus Christ, that the end of the world was at hand. In fact, Armageddon was going to happen in 1977 with a war between Russia and the United States. I was involved with many different political activities, deceptive fundraising activities, and if it hadn't been for a near-fatal car accident, it was a van accident where I fell asleep at the wheel due to sleep exhaustion and broke my leg, and my family's intervention by hiring former members to counsel me, I might still be there, because in fact the president of the Moon organization in the United States was a friend of mine back then. And it is 23 years of my life has been dedicated to helping other people get out of mind control cults, and I've had the great privilege of meeting some of the most wonderful people around the world. And I got my education about Scientology back in 1976, 1977, 1978, meeting people like Paulette Cooper, who wrote The Scandal of Scientology. I was on the David Susskind show with a former member and a friend of mine who was sued for being on TV talking about Scientology as a cult. And I've had a lot of harassment over the years, sued, followed, you know, the stuff. But I feel like in some major way that this is my calling, that somehow my cult involvement has enabled me to appreciate freedom, to appreciate liberty, to understand that the human species is in evolution right now, and we are determining our own destinies as a species, and the determination of the planet. And as we enter the new millennium, I believe we all have to stand up and establish what kind of world we want to live in. And just cowering in fear to bullies is only going to make the situation worse. And I'm biased in saying this, but I believe that former members are the best single force to educate the public, to be activists. Their family, their friends, other wonderful people with integrity like Grady are great too, but we were there. Excuse me. We've lived it. And my hope is that we will step out of the stigma attached to having been in one of these groups and speak out. I am an intelligent person. How could I bow to an altar with a Korean Messiah? It's because mind control exists. The technology exists. Hypnosis exists. For those of you who have been in Scientology, those TR drills where you had to sit and close your eyes and just be there or stare into somebody's eyes, that is hypnosis. I've been studying it for 18 years. And whenever I give a presentation to an audience of mental health professionals who know about hypnosis, And I describe the TRs, they're like, oh my God, that's a hypnotic induction. It's called eye fixation pattern. So obvious, and yet the public is still in the dark about mind control. And mind control exists. Intelligent, bright people can be deceived, seduced, indoctrinated into committing horrendous acts. And every cult member you run into is somebody's son or daughter, somebody's brother or sister, and I can only urge you to treat them with love and with respect. Love is the answer. Not more fear, not more anger, love. And understanding that if you had met Steve in 1974, 1975, you would have met a Nazi-esque Mooney who would have killed on command. No question in my mind. I was trained that well by Moon himself and one of his top lieutenants. But I'm a good guy. I mean, ask my parents, ask my sisters, ask my childhood friends. How could Steve ever get to that point? And examine the 3-day workshop, the 7-day workshop, the 21-day workshop, the 40-day workshop of Moon. Understand the control of behavior, the control of information, the control of thoughts, the control of emotions, the installation of phobias, the thought-stopping techniques that I was taught to do on myself to shut out doubts. And I've made my life work studying this and figuring out how to undo it. And the single most hopeful thing that I can say is that people want to be free. People want to know the truth. People want love. People don't want to be deceived. They don't want to be manipulated. They don't want to be abused. And if they feel love and they feel respect and they're given the truth, over time their real self will emerge, even if they were born into a mind control cult. I believe people have a sense of what is real deep down inside them. And it's the crux of my entire approach is that people have an authentic self in there that wants to be happy and wants to be fulfilled and wants to be connected and wants to have meaningful relationships. And I can tell you, not only people who are in cults are traumatized by the mind control experience, but their family, their friends are traumatized. And I can't tell you how many people, I just ran into someone last night who coincidentally came with a member of this conference who said, oh, my brother's been in TM for 35 years. Nothing I can do to help him. And whenever I hear that, my heart goes, ugh. Because after 35 years, you still can get out and you still can be free. And so this is a plug for my labor of love for the last few years, which will be available to the public. It should be printed by the first of the year, and you can start ordering it. It's called Releasing the Bonds, and I hope that it brings former members out of the closet, realizing their friends from the cult, they're still there, they need help. Family members who have written off their loved one because they were hurt 50 times. They didn't come home to the hospital. They didn't go to the funeral. They weren't the best man at the wedding. And the anger and the hurt from that. I'm hoping this book will help them to realize that it wasn't the individual's fault. They were under mind control. They were in a dependent emotional and psychological state and deserve their love, deserve to be communicated with in a very constructive way. So, having said that, I believe that we should be using the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights as our principal guideline for our activities. Basic human rights. I asked Jerry what reforms need to be done. He said, well, people shouldn't be held against their will. Yeah, good idea. How about enforcing that? read the United Nations guidelines for human rights. Copies should be handed out as you're protesting, as you're communicating people, and say, we just want human rights. We want people to choose, to have the freedom to choose who they associate with, to have the freedom of the press to read what they want to read. They have a right to good education. They have a right to medical treatment. Basic human rights. Okay, and as far as activism goes, the internet is the greatest gift for fighting totalitarianism and mind control. Why? Because one of the critical core pieces of mind control is information control. You have a dictator who wants to take over a country. First thing, they abolish the free press, they round up the dissidents, they kill them or they put them in jail. Why? Because they want to control information, because information is the food we use to think. And the internet gives a facility to get information out 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And is everyone on the internet? No. But as libraries get wired up, as schools get wired up, as people make their computer terminals available to people who don't, and say, go read it for yourself, it's going to just help that much more. And in this book, I'm arguing for a paradigm shift for the new millennium. And I'm not saying there'll never be a need for an intervention where you sit down for several days and family says, would you please speak with these former members? But I'm attempting to give the tools to the grassroots level, to family members, friends, neighbors, clergy, of what to say and how to say it, to undo the phobias, to bypass the thought stopping, so that they can go to the internet and think for them and evaluate the information for themselves and go back to the group and ask questions and figure out what's true. In my first book, Combating, I talked about the dual identity, the real self and the cult self, and how the cult self suppresses the person's real self, and how the family should and people should work to empower the real self. Well, in this book, I'm arguing not only doing that, but addressing the cult self too. Reading the cult literature, going to the cult meetings, engaging the cult self with questions, coached by former members that are going to stimulate a questioning and dissonance within the cult identity as well. And I believe as people step out from the closet, the stigma of saying, yep, I was conned, I was a cult member, it will get easier and easier for this process to happen. I'm particularly anxious to try to see what can be done to approach celebrities. My book in Japan was a huge bestseller. It sold 200,000 copies in Japan, essentially because a very famous woman, an Olympic gymnast who had been converted to the Moonies, went and had press conferences saying, I was under mind control, and read Hassan's book on mind control. And she did it over and over and over again, and people read it. And it began, the term mind control entered the Japanese culture. And celebrities have a great responsibility. And we've seen how celebrities have been used to seduce people into destructive cults. And I think celebrities have a responsibility to help people have human rights and to help preserve freedom. A few other things I just want to say, and then we can do questions and we can talk further. I really believe that every city needs to have a former member support group. And I don't mean just former members of any one particular cult. I mean former members of lots of cults. Because I found it to be incredibly helpful and therapeutic for former members of the Moonies to meet former members of Scientology, to meet former members of Krishna, to meet former members of TM, to meet former members of Jehovah's Witnesses, all these other mind control groups. And even though the words and the beliefs were different, to see how common the mind control patterns were with all these groups. And former member groups, parent support groups. People who have a loved one who's still in a cult, even if they're an ex-wife. You know, it's still your children's mother that's still in there. Meet together, learn about cults and mind control, and if you're walking on the street and you meet a cult member, whether they're recruiting or not, engage them in a loving way, not in an angry way, not in a confrontational way. Talk to them as a human being. When I was in the Moonies, someone offered to buy me a drink on a hot day, and it touched me, because as a Moonie, I was taught that we were the only true Christians on earth, and everybody else was evil and satanic, and here was someone who was just being a nice person and thoughtful, and it touched me. And I really encourage you to think about the mindset of someone who's still in the cult. They're constantly being indoctrinated to fear the outside world, and people are going to be angry and hostile and everything. And the more love you can show to them, the more kindness and compassion you can show to them. It's incredibly powerful. And being a former member that's happy in your life, that's the cure, in a sense, to phobias. Because when you're in a cult, you're told, oh, if you leave, you're going to go crazy, you're going to be get cancer, you're going to be hit by a car, you're going to have this problem, this problem, this problem. Meeting a former member, I mean, when Moonies meet me, they don't know what to make out of me, because they've been indoctrinated that I'm Satan. And I'm nice to them, and I ask them questions, and I engage them, and they're like, boo, 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 boo. And I just let them know, hey, I do believe in God. I do believe God created us with free will. If he didn't want us to have free will, he would have made us as slaves or clones to start out with. And the only way to exercise free will is to have information and make your own decisions. And if you've been listening to what the Moonies have been saying for 20 years, how about sitting down with some former members for a few days? You think you deserve it? Because the truth will stand. You listen to these claims of these groups, they're unbelievable. Test them. And again, I repeat, I really believe in my heart of hearts that people want to be free. They don't want to give up their free will. I keep hearing people say, oh, so-and-so is weak. He just needed someone to control, take over his life. I don't buy that argument. In fact, in this book, I talk about all the common errant beliefs, they're in it too long, there's no hope, or there's no such thing as mind control, or everything is mind control, or I believe there are answers, and I believe that we have to work together. They're Gabe, seeing Gabe again. I mean, how long ago has it been that we first met? 76, 77? Yeah, I mean, this man is a legend in my mind of courage. And everyone here, I think, too. So let's decide that we want a planet where there's freedom and liberty and human rights. And thank you.
You want to take a nap? Well, we'll open it up for questions. Stacy?
I don't have a question. I just want to tell everybody I've read Stevie's book and it's incredible. You've got to get it.
Thank you for that unsolicited endorsement.
You got to show it on the camera again.
Thanks.
It's not available yet, right? It's
right.
A week or so.
By the 13th of December, you can you'll be able to order on my website, freedomofmind.com, and there'll be an 800 number. And come April, May, it will be in every bookstore in the country. Yes.
I'm the mother of a former member. It's very painful to have your kids in a cult. I would like very much to establish some kind of a group for families and friends, cult members in my area, and I was wondering if you could help me get started with that.
Absolutely. In chapter 13 of this book is my wish list of all the things I think need to happen. and a support group, not only for people who are still trying to rescue a loved one out, but a support group of people who know what you've been through, who have a similar or parallel kind of experience. And it starts with one person saying, I want to organize something, and I am more than delighted to share all the steps of how to go about doing it. I envision making some videotapes in the near future, like how to organize a support group and such. I think it would be great to find a mental health professional who might be able to facilitate, because there's a lot of hurting people out there. And by the way, one of the things about Scientology, I'm sure I'm not telling anything new to a lot of people in this room, but one of their things is to trash all mental health professionals. They're psychs, and they all want to do drugs and lobotomize and rape. And I don't believe in any of those three. Thank you very much. In fact, I've encountered a lot of loving, caring people who enter the mental health field because they want to learn how to help people, to counsel people. And I really do believe that it's helped me enormously in my work, getting training, going and getting a master's degree in psychology, getting supervised by psychologists and psychiatrists, going each year to workshops to develop my skills. And but anyway, to answer your question, it starts with this yourself or somebody saying, I want to start something, and then I can help you. I know the book will certainly help. Create a small group, and it grows from there. So let's do it. Anyone else have a question or comment? Yes?
I was just wondering how likely it is that these cults are going to grow into the future, because one of the earmarks of a cult is they prey on insecure people. And now I understand we're seeing this big trend where parenting, the ability for children to be raised in a proper environment like they have in the past is growing less and less. And what's probably going to happen in the future is we're going to see more of these insecure kids, and they're going to be prey to be scooped up by more and more cults.
Yeah.
So I'm beginning to really worry that this is a growing trend.
Well,
And,
I can tell you, I mean, maybe my parents and my sisters would say otherwise, but I was a very secure kid. I mean, my parents didn't smoke, drink, gamble. They just celebrated their 53rd wedding anniversary. They still live in the same house. And I was susceptible to a mind control cult. And my biggest susceptibility was I had broken up with a girlfriend, and 3 attractive women approached me. But the biggest vulnerability was I was ignorant about cults and mind control. If anything, I had too high an opinion of my ability to exert my free will, because I had bicycled cross country when I was 16, and I worked in my father's hardware store. I thought I knew how, the games. But this is a very different thing. The good news, preventive inoculation. Have former members go in on a junior high school level, and tell your story. And you don't have to talk about a specific group if a high school board objects. Just talk generally about confidence rackets and how to ask critical questions. Oh, you're with a group. Who's the leader? What's the beliefs? What's expected of me? And to learn that if you don't get a concrete answer, you get a vague, effusive, global response, there's something wrong. But even if you get a believable answer, go do independent research. Go on the internet and do some searches. Again, because if it's legitimate, it will stand up to scrutiny. I can tell you that because there's been so many divorces in the United States, there are a lot of traumatized people. Certainly a lot of kids are traumatized when their parents divorce and such. So are those people more susceptible to manipulation? Possibly. One of the major components of mind control is sleep deprivation. Well, are you aware that in the United States of America, the bulk of our workforce is chronically sleep deprived? That is a great worry to me. Because if you're sleep deprived, you're not functioning at your best. and I think we deserve to function at our best. Anything else?
For those who may have further questions, I'd like to invite people down to the open house, just meeting down at the Edgewater room, which is down to into the hall, turn right. Don't forget tonight at 7 p.m. is a candlelight vigil for Lisa McPherson at the Peace Memorial Presbyterian Church, 110 South Fort Harrison, which is the church the real church just north of the Fort Harrison Hotel.